Imagine we have two groups of high school students, right, existing in the same school. One group is commonly thought of as popular and cool, and everybody knows them, everybody likes them. I mean, seriously though, you know the group. And so these students are all that and some, meaning their clique is believed to be everything. And they tend to be generally favored by everyone in that environment. And so, I mean, you can see it, right? And there is this informal understanding within the school's culture of who they are. And so these students present themselves as empowered, bold, and confident, often holding down lead positions because they are almost guaranteed to run and win school offices. And so maybe their clique is known by the style or way they dress. Whatever they wear or do, for that matter, is seen as the best. Or perhaps it's in the way that they talk, dropping little nuggets here or there, no biggie really, but that keeps the others reminded of who they are. After all, these are the cool kids. Now, let's think about this other group. Yes, the kids who have been othered and who are often viewed as the exact opposite of the cool group. And not because they chose to be, but because that's how they have been labeled, grouped, and altogether thought to be. And by who? Well, let's think about this. Because distinctions have to be made, right? After all, the stellar reputation of the cool kids depends on it. And so the unpopular ones or the others don't just wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, I would absolutely love to be the weird one today. The one that knows I will be so fronted on and embarrassed should I ever find myself in their, meaning the cool kids, in their huddle of friends. No, that's totally not how that works. And so it is then the decidedly cool kids that define the others. And so then keeping in sync with how the others are often thought about or treated at the same high school, there's really not a lot to say about them other than, I don't know, they're just different. And for whatever reason, they just don't seem to fit in. And so generally, they receive very little attention unless negative. And instead, they are just kind of tolerated, put up with, or clearly understood as who not to be if you want to be accepted. And as long as they stay out of the way or flow of the cool kids, then usually everything's peachy. And so like I often say to my college students, who many of which are not long out of high school themselves, now that you have this picture and this kind of interaction as a point of reference, let's think about this critically. Because this high school is just like our society, our cities, our nation, our globe even, and all social structures and institutions that fall between them, where there is a historically clear way of communicating and understanding who's who, meaning which group is in, which group is out, or perhaps which bunch is normal and which folks are not. And so it is under this same group arrangement, along with verbal and nonverbal exchanges, that marginalized populations come to be othered or experience what can be referred to as microaggressions or microaggressive behaviors, where many marginalized persons risk being exposed and reminded of being assigned to the other group and therefore left feeling vulnerable, uncomfortable, and altogether uneasy, as if the last or least desired kid picked to be on the team. Translation: any place, any time, any given situation, at a bus stop, a museum, or perhaps while out shopping even, that marginalized populations come to be publicly humiliated or identified as the other through presumptuous statements and questions like, wow, your English is pretty good. So where are you from? which is often code for somehow you don't look American to me. And as a sidebar, critically thinking, what does that mean? No, really, what does looking American mean? In any case, the assumption is then that they are not, and really whether they are or not, can we understand how they were just othered in the huddle? Kind of pointed out as, I don't know, maybe appearing unordinary perhaps, or how about asking someone, so what are you exactly? As if the answer is a prerequisite for interacting with them, all the while taking assessment of their eyes or perhaps their skin complexion. Because see, once again, there is this seemingly unwavering need to assign people to categories, or just maybe exposure or othering come through statements that somehow suggest you as being special. Like, you're the different one. Okay. And so let's go with that. Different how exactly? Like, what does that mean, right? Sounds just like what happens with the cool kids versus the other students at the high school. In any case, these are microaggressions, what I like to think of as seemingly well-intended statements and questions and behaviors really that are insulting and condescending with very racialized coding attached to them. And so in essence, when I speak of microaggressions, I am speaking of a concept coined by Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry and Education at Harvard University, Dr. Chester Pierce, that refers to what I will describe as below radar behaviors that, whether intended or not, act as dog whistles for racism and xenophobic exchanges. And so while in this talk I am speaking to racial and ethnic interactions, likewise, you should know that microaggressions can also be applicable, experienced, and understood with other group dynamics regarding gender, sexual orientation, religion, and so forth. That said, let me reiterate a few things. One, microaggressions can be subtle and more often than not occur with seemingly well-intended folks. Two, facial expressions and body language can be equally telling and impactful. And so it is important to know that the huffs and puffs, rolling of eyes, shifting bodies, eerily gawking at someone, or refusing to make eye contact altogether, and instead the whole talking past you thing, as if everyone else in the room or discussion matters, and you do not, especially when racial matters are brought up. Then sending vibes that suggest, give it a rest, enough already. Why do we have to keep talking about this? I have a black friend. All the while unknowingly and perhaps even unintentionally communicating arrogance, privilege, or a lack of consideration for context. How all of this interaction might be landing. See, people of color simply do not get race breaks. There are no timeouts, scheduled intermissions, or cushiony, convenient moments for experiencing discrimination. If anything, there are only instances of psychological redress where many marginalized persons feel culturally compelled or cornered really to not even address these issues as they occur for fear of being further stigmatized and identified as rebel rousers, combative, radical, militant, and other very racialized, or perhaps we can just say microaggressive labels that negatively impact the true and possible cultural and racial education to transformation process, which is the reason for this very talk. We persons of color simply can't press pause on the social construction of race and its social implications as attached to our black and brownness. And so the thought or idea of color blindness or a colorblind society is a myth, and unknowingly in and of itself is a microaggression. So sure, it's a catchy suggestion. Sounds good, sounds pretty unifying on the surface, which is all we want. what we all should want. We should want unity. But let's be honest, does saying that now make me appear clear? Am I now translucent? Can you suddenly not see me sashaying my honey brown caramel complexion as I speak? Or, better yet, let's think of it this way. If you had to describe me to someone, what all would you say? And in what order? And if by chance you did not mention race, would it then be gender? It's just another category for judging based on historic and compromising distinctions. And so by virtue of social construction and stratification, ignoring race and this notion of color blindness is simply not possible because whether admitted or not, people have been socialized or taught directly and indirectly to identify, group, and define all people based on superficial characteristics. And so it becomes incumbent upon all of us to study these matters, to study. And more importantly, to keep culturally diverse and truly progressive people in both our professional and personal circles. Why? Because our culture keeps reverting and diverting folks who only focus on the most obvious aspects of discrimination, like burning crosses, spray painting hate graffiti on property, using the N-word or other similar highly publicized historical actions that we've all come to know so well. And so as a result, people are then left comfortably unknowledgeable, unaware, and unable to recognize or even gauge what is appropriate or inappropriate, sensitive or insensitive beyond those things when interacting with marginalized populations, which in many respects is translation for this as being unimportant and you not having to even be aware of it. And so then this is how people who believe themselves to have the best of intentions come to be surprisingly labeled as racist, then feel hurt, confused even, and ultimately find themselves as unpopular and uncomfortable or at risk of being distanced or picked last in their own huddle. And so instead of only knowing to disavow the displaying swastikas, hanging nooses, and other obvious actions, likewise, the mission and sense of urgency has to be the same in staying clear of microaggressions, those subtle othering behaviors, comments like your kind and people like you, or maybe actions such as complimenting someone on their hairstyle, which is great, instead of asking a series of intrusive questions about it and presumptuously trying to touch it to feel, don't do that, to feel the texture of it. Or maybe we should not talk and act as if we are deeply connected with the Hispanic and Latino community because we love tacos and fajitas, or just maybe we should not assume that all persons of Asian descent are rich and work in Silicon Valley, or reference them even as model minorities, which is actually a backhanded insult. I could go on, as this is an invaluable opportunity to learn and grow if you are receptive. After all, my mission has simply been to call attention to more subtleties and nuances of everyday, seemingly normalized discriminative behaviors with the hope of divulging information that might advance us intellectually and humanitarianly, which intrinsically means entering into, embracing, and sharing in this space of enlightenment and altruism where personal and cultural transparency and conviction becomes forever unavoidable, where historically induced social awareness remains fundamental, followed by an unequivocal acknowledgement of power, privilege, or really this very real global consequential thing better known as dominant entitlement, perhaps ownership even. The idea of becoming ever so cognizant of one's social location and what that location means and makes possible or not for those whose everyday existence is fashioned by discrimination. And then, if I could be so blessed, assuming that after having arrived in some measure to an increased knowledge of systematic arrangements and culpability, I thank you for being receptive. and embracing all that's possible through social transformation, which means, like our theme, rise, right? And so for rising to the occasion in this treasured moment of time, critically thinking and rethinking the status quo, all the while aiming to rise through what is often characterized as unreasonable and unnecessary dialogue, and yet still pushing with the hope of rising because, yes, we keep addressing racism, sexism, racism, classism, homophobia, racism again, religious intolerance, and on and on and on. Yes, that unavoidable place where some have and may still voice discontentment through denial, perhaps out loud or even inside, as if neither are discernible. And they are, because remember, those two are microaggressions, which is exactly the point of all of this, because see, no matter the wording or volume of the sentiments, we rise through our ability to identify, uncover, disavow, and disallow those feelings, those attitudes, wherever and however they exist, that other our right and ability to share in unimaginable, equitable, and harmonious space. And so I challenge you, dear friends, to challenge you, meaning yourself and your neighbors too, to rise as interconnected, interdependent members of our wonderful global community, and to do so while continuing to learn, process, and ultimately digest the socialization and comfortability of microaggressions. Thank you.